The biting wind was a familiar companion, a constant reminder of Lyra's exile, each gust carrying the phantom whispers of a kingdom that had long forgotten her, or perhaps wished it had. Her dark skin, a mark of the Tainted in Eldoria's pristine, pale-skinned society, felt like a brand of shame burned into her very soul, a curse she had neither asked for nor understood. Years of isolation had carved deep hollows into her spirit, leaving behind a profound loneliness that echoed in the desolate fringes she called home. Every sunrise was a brutal testament to her unending struggle, a battle against the elements and the crushing weight of ancestral rejection. She yearned for a place where her existence wasn't a constant apology, a longing that sometimes felt more dangerous than the dormant magic simmering beneath her skin, a power she feared as much as it secretly intrigued her. This was her normal, a life defined by hardship and the silent scream of an outcast heart. Her days were a monotonous cycle of survival, foraging for the sparse growth that clung to the barren earth, mending the threadbare garments that offered little protection against the chill, and always, scanning the horizon for signs of intrusion. For the judgmental eyes she knew still sought her out. The profound rejection of her own people had left her heart a tapestry of scars, each thread woven with a memory of scorn and fear. Yet, amidst the crushing weight of her supposed curse, a defiant spark flickered, a secret desire to uncover the truth behind the power that both terrified and called to her. This wasn't just her story. It was a fragment of something larger, a saga waiting to unfold. Comment where you're watching us from and subscribe, because this story is just beginning. Now, let's continue. Lyra's life was a testament to enduring pain, a solitary existence that begged for a turning point, a moment when the world would finally see beyond the taint, the shame of her forbidden magic. A gift twisted into a curse by the rigid traditions of Eldoria was a constant companion, a heavy cloak she could never shed. She remembered glimpses of her childhood, fleeting moments of warmth before the whispers began, before the elders cast their condemning gazes upon her, sealing her fate. Her earliest memories were not of joy, but of being pointed at, of mothers pulling their children away, of the chilling silence that followed her every step. This deep-seated trauma had festered, leaving her vulnerable to every imagined slight, making her withdraw further into herself, convinced of her own impurity. Yet, in the quiet solitude of her makeshift shelter, she would sometimes touch the faint, almost imperceptible glow beneath her skin, a terrifying beauty that promised both destruction and an unimaginable liberation she dared not dream of. The burden of this hidden power was a responsibility she carried alone, a secret that isolated her more profoundly than any physical banishment. Even in these desolate fringes, far removed from the hallowed halls of Eldoria, the creeping tendrils of the blight were beginning to show. The ancient trees, once vibrant even here, now bore sickly leaves and brittle branches, their life force slowly draining away, mirroring the slow death of hope Lyra felt within her own heart. She saw the despair in the wilting flora, felt the chill in the air grow harsher, and understood, with a chilling certainty, that the kingdom's affliction was not just a distant rumor. It was a creeping plague, one that would eventually consume even her forgotten corner of the world. Rumors, carried by the infrequent, terrified travelers who mistakenly stumbled upon her territory, spoke of King Theron's desperation, of a kingdom teetering on the precipice. Lyra, the tainted outcast, felt a strange, detached empathy, a premonition that the fate of Eldoria, however distant, might somehow be irrevocably intertwined with her own cursed existence. One crisp evening, as the twin moons began their ascent, casting long, distorted shadows across the barren landscape, a flicker of movement caught Lyra's eye. It wasn't the usual skittering of a desert creature, nor the rustle of the dying foliage. A figure, cloaked and hooded, was approaching her solitary dwelling with an almost unnerving directness, cutting through the twilight as if guided by an unseen force. Her heart, long accustomed to the steady rhythm of fear, hammered against her ribs with a new, terrifying intensity. This was no lost traveler seeking refuge. The deliberate pace, the regal bearing even beneath the concealing cloak, spoke of purpose. As the figure drew closer, a glint of silver caught the moonlight, the unmistakable crest of Eldoria, a symbol she had not seen since her banishment. Her breath hitched. Something was about to change, irrevocably and violently, shattering the fragile peace of her exile and dragging her back into the world she had fought so desperately to escape. The sting of the first whisper was a physical blow, sharper than any Eldorian winter wind. Lyra was barely a child, her laughter still echoing through the sun-dappled groves, when the elder's eyes, once warm, turned to chips of ice. She remembered the day vividly, a small flicker of light, an accidental spark of dormant magic, had escaped her tiny hands, illuminating a hidden spring. Instead of awe, there was horror. Her mother, usually a gentle presence, had recoiled, a silent scream in her eyes. That moment tore her world apart, severing the tender threads of belonging, replacing them with a chilling sense of otherness. The memory of her father's stoic, averted gaze as the decree of banishment was read out still haunted her dreams, a phantom weight pressing down on her chest. She had lost not just a home, but the fundamental right to be seen as a daughter, a kin, a part of her own people. This profound familial and societal rejection became the core of her being, a festering wound that never truly healed. It wasn't merely the physical exile to the desolate fringes, but the deeper, more insidious banishment from the hearts and minds of those she had once called her own. Every interaction, every fleeting glance from a passing merchant who ventured too close, was filtered through the lens of her taint, reinforcing the insidious belief that she was fundamentally flawed, unworthy of love or acceptance. Her self-worth had been systematically eroded, replaced by a brittle shell of resilience and a pervasive loneliness that seeped into her bones. She existed in a constant state of internal apology, an echo of the countless times she had been made to feel like a stain on Eldoria's pristine tapestry, a living testament to a forbidden truth. What Lyra feared most wasn't just the inherent danger of her burgeoning magic, but the terrifying prospect of unleashing it and confirming every one of Eldoria's prejudices. She harbored a secret, gnawing terror that if she ever allowed the power to fully manifest, she would inevitably cause destruction, proving herself truly the monster they believed her to be. This fear shackled her spirit, preventing her from exploring the true nature of her abilities, keeping her trapped in a cycle of suppression and self-doubt. The loneliness of her exile, while brutal, had also become a perverse form of protection, a self-imposed prison where she couldn't accidentally harm anyone, couldn't deepen the chasm of her own isolation by bringing more scorn upon herself. She lived in constant vigilance, not just against external threats, but against the volatile storm brewing within her own soul. Beneath the layers of fear and ingrained self-loathing, Lyra yearned for a sanctuary, a place where her dark skin wasn't a mark of shame and her magic wasn't a curse. She craved understanding, a knowing gaze that saw beyond the taint to the desperate heart beating beneath. More than anything, she needed acceptance, not grudging tolerance, but genuine belonging. A space where she could shed the heavy mantle of outcast and simply exist, unjudged. This longing was a quiet, desperate ache, a silent prayer whispered to the twin moons on lonely nights. It was the desperate need for validation, for someone to witness her true self, vulnerabilities and all, and not flinch away in horror, but offer a hand, a word of solace, a connection that transcended Eldoria's rigid doctrines. The idea of romance, of shared intimacy and vulnerability, felt like a cruel jest, a fantasy utterly beyond her reach. How could anyone truly love a woman branded as tainted, whose very essence was deemed an abomination? Her past had taught her a bitter lesson. Love was conditional, tied to purity and lineage, qualities she inherently lacked. The chasm of status between her, the banished outcast, and any eligible partner in Eldoria was insurmountable, a social barrier reinforced by centuries of tradition and fear. She carried the weight of her curse like a physical deformity, convinced it rendered her inherently undesirable, a tragic figure destined for a solitary existence. Her heart, though capable of immense depth, had built impenetrable walls, convinced that to love or be loved was to invite only deeper pain and inevitable rejection. The dormant magic within her was not merely a threat, but also a constant, unsettling presence, a hum beneath her skin that sometimes resonated with the very earth. She felt its pull, a seductive whisper promising power and understanding, yet she fought it with every fiber of her being, terrified of its implications. Suppressing it was a daily battle, draining her energy, leaving her perpetually weary. This internal conflict was a solitary war, a secret burden she couldn't share, even if there was anyone to confide in. The whispers of the blight, the decaying forests, only heightened her anxiety, creating a terrifying link in her mind between her own taint and the kingdom's suffering. She couldn't shake the terrifying thought that her very existence might be a catalyst for Eldoria's ultimate demise. The approaching figure from the previous evening revealed itself, not as a lone traveler, but as a detachment of royal guards, their Eldorian crests glinting under the rising sun. Their leader, a stern-faced captain, dismounted, his voice cutting through the crisp air with an authority Lyra hadn't heard in decades. Lyra, the Tainted. By royal decree of King Theron, you are summoned to the capital. You are to come immediately. Her blood ran cold. The words hung heavy, a death knell to her fragile solitude, tearing her from the desolate fringes and thrusting her back into the heart of the kingdom that had cast her out. She understood nothing of this sudden, terrifying command, only the absolute certainty that her life, as she knew it, was irrevocably over, and a new, perilous chapter was about to begin within the very walls that once condemned her. In this channel, I bring you the most epic and intense romance stories. Every week, a new world, a new impossible passion. The capital of Eldoria, a city Lyra had only ever seen in distant or fragmented memories, loomed before her. Not as a beacon of home, but as a gilded cage. She was ushered through grand archways, past guards whose gazes were a mixture of fear and scorn, until she stood in the throne room. There, on a dais elevated above all, sat King Theron. His presence was a physical force, a heavy cloak of authority that settled over the chamber, silencing even the rustle of his crimson robes. He was tall, with a warrior's build, his features sharp and regal, framed by hair the color of midnight. His eyes, though, were what truly held her, deep pools of jade that seemed to pierce through her very soul, carrying the weight of centuries, a silent judgment that promised no mercy. The air crackled with unspoken power, and Lyra, the banished outcast, felt smaller, more exposed than ever before. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, convinced this summons was merely a prelude to her ultimate demise. King Theron, in turn, felt the familiar, suffocating grip of his crown, a burden heavier than any physical weight. His court, a sea of disapproving faces, murmured like a restless tide, their collective gaze a constant pressure. The Eldorian nobility, steeped in ancient traditions of purity, viewed his recent decree with barely concealed outrage. Whispers of sacrilege and madness followed him, fueled by rival noble houses who saw his desperation as an opportunity to undermine his rule and seize power. Each decision he made was scrutinized, each move a perilous dance on the edge of a political precipice. He was a king, absolute in power, yet profoundly isolated, surrounded by those who sought to control him or betray him, his every action dictated by the desperate need to save a kingdom teetering on the brink of annihilation. The Blight, a creeping sickness that turned Eldoria's vibrant forests into skeletal ruins, was a constant, gnawing terror that plagued Theron's waking hours and haunted his dreams. The ancient magic that sustained their kingdom, once a boundless wellspring, now dwindled, mirroring the life force draining from the land. He had consulted every elder, every scholar, every seer, only to be met with grim faces and vague prophecies. The eternal moon, a celestial event of immense power, was their last hope, a fleeting window tied to a forgotten law, a desperate gamble. He felt the immense pressure of his ancestors, their spirits whispering in the hallowed halls, demanding a solution, yet offering no clear path, only the crushing weight of their expectations and the terrifying prospect of ultimate failure. Beneath Theron's stoic, unyielding facade lay a profound loneliness, a desolate emptiness that echoed in the vastness of his castle. He was a king, revered and feared, yet utterly alone, bound by a destiny he had not chosen but was forced to uphold. The crushing weight of ancestral duties, the legacy of Eldoria, pressed down on him, stripping away any semblance of personal desire or solace. He carried the burden of his people's survival, a solitary sentinel guarding against the encroaching darkness. Fear, a cold, unwelcome guest, often gripped his heart. Fear for the future of his kingdom, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of being the king who presided over Eldoria's final, agonizing breath. This hidden vulnerability, carefully concealed, made his choices even more agonizing. This gnawing desperation, the looming shadow of Eldoria's demise, was why Lyra now stood before him. The forgotten prophecy, deciphered by the last remnants of the ancient mystics, spoke of a unique magic, a taint born under the eternal moon, a power that could either heal or destroy. It was a sacrilege, a direct affront to Eldoria's most sacred tenets of purity, to even consider such a union. Yet Theron, driven to the very edge of despair, saw no other path. She was anathema, an abomination in the eyes of his court, but also in the chilling certainty of the prophecy, the only key to unlocking the ancient magic that could reverse the Blight. His decision to reclaim her was a desperate gamble, a calculated risk that could either save his kingdom or condemn them all to an even swifter ruin. Lyra's gaze met his, a silent challenge in her dark eyes, despite the tremor in her stance. She was an enigma, a dangerous variable in his meticulously planned desperation. He saw the defiance, the pain, the haunted vulnerability in her, and a flicker of something else, a raw, untamed power he couldn't yet grasp. The chamber was thick with tension, the air heavy with the weight of their disparate worlds colliding. He knew she feared him, believed him capable of any cruelty, and in a way, she was not wrong. He would do whatever was necessary for Eldoria, but as his eyes locked onto hers, a strange, electric current passed between them, a dangerous spark of recognition that hinted at a connection far more complex and perilous than a mere royal decree. The fate of Eldoria now rested on this impossible, forced union. King Theron descended from his dais, his steps deliberate, each movement radiating an authority that both drew and repelled Lyra. He stopped just a few paces from her, close enough for her to feel the subtle warmth emanating from his formidable presence, the faint scent of ancient cedar and something uniquely Eldorian, potent and wild. His jade eyes, once distant, now held hers captive, a scrutinizing gaze that stripped away her defenses, revealing the raw vulnerability she had so carefully guarded. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken questions and the heavy burden of their converging fates. Lyra's breath hitched, her body taut with an instinctual fight-or-flight response, yet she remained rooted, a silent defiance warring with a profound, terrifying curiosity. This was more than a king. This was a force of nature, and she, the outcast, was caught in its orbit. His voice, a low timbre that resonated through the grand hall, sliced through the tense silence. Devoid of the usual Eldorian disdain she expected, yet laced with an urgency that spoke of deeper turmoil. Lyra, the blight consumes us. Eldoria, the kingdom that cast you out, is dying. Our ancient magic, the very essence of our existence, wanes with each passing day, and my council, steeped in traditions they refuse to question, offers only platitudes and fear. He gestured vaguely to the silent, disapproving nobles, a flash of bitterness crossing his regal features, revealing a king burdened by a desperate, solitary struggle. The prophecy speaks of a unique power, a taint born under the eternal moon, a force that could either heal or destroy. You are that prophecy, Lyra. My people whisper of sacrilege, Theron continued, his voice dropping to a near growl, his gaze sweeping over the court, daring anyone to challenge him, rival noble houses, sensing weakness, plot my downfall, eager to exploit this crisis for their own gain. They see my desperation, my decision to bring you here, as madness, an affront to everything Eldoria holds sacred. They would rather see the kingdom crumble to dust than embrace a truth that defies their rigid doctrines of purity. His hand clenched into a fist at his side, a barely controlled tremor betraying the immense pressure he faced, the constant threat of betrayal from within his own halls, a silent war he fought daily. But the prophecy is clear, Theron stated, his eyes locking onto hers once more, a fierce, unyielding resolve hardening his gaze. The eternal moon, a celestial event of immense power, approaches. Its light, combined with the dormant magic you possess, is the only key to restoring Eldoria's fading life force, to reversing the blight that threatens to erase us from existence. It is a desperate gamble, a path fraught with peril and certain condemnation from those who cling to antiquated beliefs. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, his proposal hanging unspoken yet palpable in the charged air between them. Therefore, Theron finally declared, his words resonating with the finality of a decree, I propose a union, a marriage, Lyra, not of love, nor even of true affection, but a pact, a temporary alliance forged in desperation. You will stand by my side as my queen, if only in name, lending credence to my claim that this prophecy is our salvation. In return, you will be protected from those who seek to harm you, from the lingering scorn of this court, and from the encroaching darkness of the blight itself. He watched her carefully, gauging her reaction, his expression unreadable. This alliance would grant you a position of power, an unparalleled opportunity to understand the magic that flows within you, free from the shadows of exile. You would have access to Eldoria's vast libraries, its ancient lore, and the protection of its throne. Your days of foraging and fear would end. You would no longer be an outcast, but a queen, albeit one bound by a sacred yet fragile promise. It is the only way to save Eldoria, and in doing so, perhaps, to save yourself. Lyra's mind reeled, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions threatening to overwhelm her. The sheer audacity of his proposal, the shocking reversal of her fate, left her breathless. To be queen, to be welcomed, even under duress, into the kingdom that had so cruelly cast her aside. The thought twisted her gut, a bitter irony that tasted of both salvation and profound humiliation. Her pride screamed in defiance, rejecting the notion of being a pawn in his desperate game, a means to an end. Yet a deeper part of her, the part that yearned for belonging, for purpose, for an end to the crushing loneliness, saw a terrifying, undeniable glimmer of hope. Her gaze, once timid, hardened, meeting his without flinching. "I will agree to your proposal, King Theron," Lyra stated, her voice surprisingly steady, a newfound strength resonating within her. The words were a shocking admission, a surrender to an impossible fate, yet she felt a defiant spark ignite within her soul. "I will stand by your side, but know this, I am no mere pawn. I will be your queen, but on one condition. You will allow me full access to Eldoria's archives, to every text, every scroll, every forbidden whisper regarding my taint. I will not merely be a symbol. I will understand the power within me, and if it is to save your kingdom, it will be on my terms." Lyra's defiant acceptance silenced the murmuring court, their collective gasps echoing the outrage that rippled through the grand hall. Theron's jade eyes, which had held hers in a silent battle of wills, narrowed imperceptibly, his surprise quickly masked by kingly composure. He had expected resistance, but not this bold counter-demand for forbidden knowledge. Her condition, a testament to her fierce spirit, resonated with a part of him that recognized true purpose. With a curt nod sealing their precarious pact, he declared, "So be it. The union will be solemnized at the rising of the next moon. Prepare the royal chambers for your queen." This channel brings you the most epic and intense romance stories. Every week, a new world, a new impossible passion. The words, heavy with both promise and peril, cemented her new, terrifying reality. The ceremony was a stark affair. Stripped of the opulent pageantry usually afforded a royal wedding, a deliberate choice by Theron to minimize the court's outrage, yet it did little to quell the palpable tension. It took place in a smaller, more intimate antechamber, illuminated by the pale, ethereal glow of the newly risen eternal moon, its light casting long, spectral shadows across the stone floor. Lyra, draped in a simple gown of deep sapphire, felt the weight of every disapproving gaze, each whisper a physical blow. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, a drumbeat of fear and reluctant hope as she stood before the high priest, his ancient eyes betraying a profound unease at this sacrilegious union. This was no celebration of love, but a grim, necessary ritual, a binding of two disparate fates for the desperate survival of a dying kingdom. From the periphery, the Eldorian nobility watched, their faces a tableau of barely concealed disgust and thinly veiled ambition. Lady Arana, matriarch of a powerful rival house, her lips a thin, cruel line, made no effort to mask her disdain, her gaze raking over Lyra's dark skin as if it were a blight itself. Whispers of abomination and madness slithered through the hushed chamber, punctuated by the rustle of expensive silks as courtiers shifted uncomfortably. Their loyalty to Theron tested by this unprecedented defiance of tradition. Lyra felt the collective weight of their judgment press down on her, a familiar, suffocating cloak that threatened to extinguish the fragile spark of resolve she had painstakingly ignited. Her past rejections echoed in their scornful eyes, reminding her of the impossible chasm of status and prejudice she was now forced to bridge. King Theron stood beside her, a towering presence of unyielding resolve, his hand resting lightly, almost possessively, on the small of her back as the high priest chanted the ancient vows. His jade eyes swept across the assembled court, a silent, menacing challenge that dared anyone to openly question his decree. There was a raw, primal protective instinct in his posture, a subtle yet unmistakable declaration of ownership that momentarily silenced the most audacious whispers. He was a king defending his controversial choice, his unwavering gaze conveying both the gravity of their situation and a fierce determination to see this desperate gamble through. For a fleeting moment, Lyra felt a flicker of something akin to safety. a strange warmth emanating from his formidable presence that momentarily shielded her from the icy scorn of Eldoria. The high priest's voice, a solemn drone, reached its crescendo, demanding their vows, binding them in words that spoke of duty and sacrifice, not affection. Theron's voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber, his promises delivered with an unwavering conviction that sent a shiver down Lyra's spine. When it was her turn, her own words, though clear, were laced with a tremor she couldn't quite suppress, the weight of their impossible union pressing down on her. Then came the exchange of rings, a simple band of Eldorian silver for her, cool against her skin, and for him a ring of dark, polished stone, mirroring the color of her own skin. As his fingers brushed hers, a jolt, sharp and unexpected, coursed through her, a dangerous spark of contact that transcended the mere formality of the ritual, hinting at an unforeseen connection. "You may seal this union," the high priest intoned, his voice barely audible above the sudden, collective intake of breath from the court. Theron turned, his jade eyes locking onto hers, an unreadable intensity burning within their depths. Slowly, deliberately, he raised a hand, his thumb gently caressing her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that sent a strange warmth spreading through her veins, surprising her with its tenderness. His gaze dropped to her lips, and in that moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. He leaned in, his breath warm against her skin, and his lips, firm and resolute, met hers. It was meant to be a formal gesture, a public display, but the instant their mouths connected, a raw, undeniable current surged between them, a shockwave that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed walls around her heart. The kiss was a searing brand, not of pain, but of an intoxicating, forbidden fire that ignited something deep within Lyra, shattering her carefully maintained composure. Her mind screamed in protest, reeling from the sheer audacity of the sensation, a stark contrast to the sterile, duty-bound pact they had just forged. This was not the cold, impersonal touch of an agreement. It was a potent, dangerous awakening, a jolt of recognition that transcended their disparate statuses and the centuries of prejudice that separated them. The phantom whispers of her past, the rejections and the scorn, momentarily receded, eclipsed by the overwhelming, disorienting force of his touch. A treacherous part of her, long starved of human connection, yearned to lean into it, to explore the terrifying depths of this unexpected intimacy, even as her rational mind recoiled in fear. Theron felt the unexpected jolt, a raw, elemental force that surged through him the moment his lips met Lyra's, a sensation far removed from the cold calculations of his kingly duties. He had anticipated a formal, perhaps even distasteful, obligation, but instead he found himself momentarily lost in the unexpected softness of her mouth, the subtle tremble beneath his touch, her unique scent, a blend of wild herbs and something inherently Eldorian, filled his senses, stirring a primal recognition he hadn't known he possessed. This was no mere symbol. This was a woman of fierce spirit and hidden vulnerability, and the kiss, meant as a public declaration, had become a private revelation, a dangerous acknowledgement of a burgeoning connection that threatened to complicate his desperate plans in ways he had never foreseen. As Theron slowly pulled away, the lingering heat of his lips on hers, Lyra felt exposed, raw, as if the entire court had witnessed the seismic shift within her. The murmurs, though still present, now held a different quality, a blend of shock and dangerous curiosity. With a silent command, Theron led her from the antechamber, his hand gently guiding her, a public display of unity that belied the internal maelstrom gripping them both. They moved through hushed corridors, the weight of their new titles, king and queen, settling heavily upon their shoulders, each step taking them deeper into an uncertain future. If these kinds of stories captivate you, subscribe for more. The expectation of their first night hung unspoken, a silent promise that this forced union was far from a mere political agreement. The heavy oak doors of the royal chambers closed behind them with a resonant thud, sealing them within a gilded cage of their own making, plunging them into a silence more profound and terrifying than any courtly clamour. The air shimmered with an unspoken tension, thick with the echoes of their vows, the lingering ghost of the unexpected kiss, and the immense, terrifying responsibility of their shared destiny. Lyra's heart still hammered, a frantic bird trapped within her ribs, every nerve ending alive with the memory of his touch, his taste. She turned to face him, the tall, imposing figure of King Theron, now her husband, standing before her not just as a monarch, but as a man whose touch had ignited a spark that threatened to consume them both, promising that this agreement would be anything but simple, anything but cold. The heavy oak doors of the royal chambers closed behind them with a resonant thud, sealing them within a gilded cage of their own making, plunging them into a silence more profound and terrifying than any courtly clamour. The air shimmered with an unspoken tension, thick with the echoes of their vows, the lingering ghost of the unexpected kiss, and the immense, terrifying responsibility of their shared destiny. Lyra's heart still hammered, a frantic bird trapped within her ribs, every nerve ending alive with the memory of his touch, his taste. She turned to face him, the tall, imposing figure of King Theron, now her husband, standing before her not just as a monarch, but as a man whose touch had ignited a spark that threatened to consume them both, promising that this agreement would be anything but simple, anything but cold. The days that followed were a blur of alien rituals and suffocating formality. Lyra found herself adrift in a sea of Eldorian customs she neither understood nor cared for, each forced smile and veiled insult from the courtiers a fresh wound. Her mornings were spent in the royal library, a vast, echoing sanctuary, devouring ancient scrolls and forbidden texts, desperately seeking answers about her taint and the blight. The weight of Eldoria's gaze was a constant pressure, a physical manifestation of the decades of rejection, making her feel like an exhibit, a strange, dark anomaly paraded through their pristine halls, an uncomfortable reminder of the king's desperate gamble. Theron, ever the stoic monarch, observed her from a distance, his jade eyes often following her movements across the grand halls, a silent, almost imperceptible vigilance. His interactions remained formal, laced with the gravitas of their shared burden, yet Lyra sensed a shift, a softening at the edges of his formidable presence. The council, however, remained a festering wound in their fragile alliance. Lord Valerius, a silver-haired elder steeped in Eldoria's rigid traditions, openly questioned her presence, his whispers about her taint echoing through the court, poisoning the atmosphere with doubt and fear, threatening to unravel the king's authority. One evening, during a lavish royal banquet, the tension reached a boiling point. Lady Arana, her face a mask of saccharine sweetness that barely concealed her venom, approached Lyra. "Tell us, Queen Lyra," she purred, her voice carrying across the hushed hall, "do the desolate fringes not teach one proper etiquette for a queen? Or perhaps your unique heritage renders such graces unnecessary?" The question hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult aimed not just at Lyra, but at Theron's controversial choice. A ripple of suppressed snickers spread through the assembled nobility, their judgmental eyes boring into Lyra, hoping for a public humiliation. Before Lyra could even formulate a response, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air, silencing the snickers immediately. "Lady Arana," Theron stated, his voice calm yet laced with an icy edge that promised swift repercussions, "Queen Lyra's heritage is precisely why she stands here. A beacon of hope in Eldoria's darkest hour. Her strength and spirit far eclipse the petty concerns of those who cling to outdated prejudices while our kingdom withers. He stepped closer to Lyra, his hand gently resting on her lower back, a subtle yet undeniably possessive gesture that publicly declared his unwavering support, his jade eyes daring anyone to challenge his queen. The raw protectiveness in Theron's gaze, the firm yet comforting pressure of his hand, sent a wave of unexpected warmth through Lyra. It was a sensation she hadn't known she craved, a shield against the venomous scorn that had plagued her entire life. For a fleeting moment, the years of rejection, the deep-seated trauma, seemed to recede, replaced by a profound, disorienting sense of belonging. Their eyes met, and in that shared glance, a silent understanding passed between them, a dangerous acknowledgement that their forced union was becoming something far more intricate, far more perilous than either had anticipated. In the quieter moments, away from the prying eyes of the court, a fragile camaraderie began to bloom. One afternoon, Lyra found Theron in the royal gardens, a rare moment of solitude for the burdened king. He was attempting to prune a blighted rosebush, his regal hands fumbling with the shears. Lyra, observing his frustration, offered a small, unsolicited tip on how to coax life back into the dying plant, a simple gesture that led to an hour of shared, comfortable silence, punctuated by the rustle of leaves and the faint scent of decaying earth. It was a tiny crack in the rigid facade, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the crown. Lyra often found herself staring at Theron during council meetings, watching his sharp intellect at work, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the quiet authority that commanded respect. A treacherous thought would often surface unbidden in her mind. Are we really just pretending? The line between their political alliance and a deeper, unspoken connection blurred with each shared glance, each subtle act of defense, each moment of unexpected vulnerability. She wondered if he, too, felt the unsettling pull, the dangerous magnetism that threatened to redefine their very existence, pushing them towards a truth that defied all logic and tradition. The council, undeterred by Theron's previous defense, continued their relentless campaign against Lyra. Lord Valerius, emboldened by a growing faction of disgruntled nobles, directly challenged Theron during a public address, questioning Lyra's ability to truly connect with Eldoria's ancient magic, given her tainted nature. He suggested that her presence might, in fact, be exacerbating the blight, rather than healing it, planting seeds of doubt and fear among the already anxious populace. The whispers grew louder, fueled by the encroaching shadows of the blight, turning the court into a volatile powder keg, ready to ignite at any spark. The tension in the throne room was suffocating, the air thick with accusation as Lord Valerius, his voice dripping with false concern, concluded his indictment. "Your Majesty," he declared, his gaze fixed on Lyra with barely concealed malice, "we implore you to reconsider this unorthodox alliance. The blight worsens, and the people whisper of sacrilege, fearing that the taint only hastens our demise. Is it not time to acknowledge that this queen is a curse, not a cure?" The court held its breath, waiting for Theron's response. The fate of Lyra, and perhaps the kingdom, hanging precariously in the balance. Like this video, if you're already hooked, and subscribe for more epic romances. Theron's response was immediate and thunderous, his voice echoing through the grand hall, silencing every dissent. "Enough!" he roared, slamming his fist on the armrest of his throne, the sound reverberating with raw power. "The Queen's taint, as you so ignorantly call it, is the very essence of our salvation. Her connection to the eternal moon is undeniable, and I will not allow your fear-mongering and antiquated prejudices to jeopardize Eldoria's last hope." He rose, his formidable presence radiating an unyielding fury, stepping down from the dais to stand beside Lyra, his hand finding hers, a public display of unwavering unity that left no room for doubt or further challenge. Despite Theron's fierce defense, the external pressures on their union intensified. The blight, seemingly unaffected by their binding, continued its relentless spread, casting a longer shadow over Eldoria. Whispers from the council, now more urgent and desperate, began to shift from questioning Lyra's legitimacy to demanding a more tangible assurance for the kingdom's future. The gravest of these demands, echoing through the hushed corridors, was for an heir, a true Eldorian royal, untainted, to secure the lineage and ensure the continuation of their ancient bloodline, placing an impossible new burden on their already fragile, duty-bound marriage. The demand for an heir, whispered through Eldoria's hushed halls, had settled between Lyra and Theron like a suffocating shroud, a new, insurmountable barrier in their already precarious union. The fragile camaraderie they had begun to forge in their shared solitude, the subtle understanding that had flickered between them, now felt like a cruel mirage. Lyra felt the weight of it in every glance, every strained silence, the unspoken expectation, a constant pressure against her heart. Theron, too, seemed to withdraw, his stoicism hardening into an impenetrable wall, his jade eyes clouded with an anguish she couldn't decipher, an emotional distance that mirrored the vast chasm of their forced marriage. The knowledge that their alliance, however convenient, now faced this impossible biological imperative, threatened to shatter the delicate balance they had so painstakingly maintained. One frigid evening, as the twin moons cast a skeletal glow through the castle windows, Theron found Lyra in the royal library, her fingers tracing the arcane symbols of a forbidden scroll. His presence, usually a comfort, now felt heavy with dread. "Lyra," he began, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, "there is a truth the council has demanded I keep hidden, a secret that binds us to a fate far more cruel than I ever allowed myself to imagine." He paused, his gaze fixed on the ancient texts, unable to meet her eyes. "The eternal moon, the celestial event that awakened your magic, also carries a profound curse for our lineage. The prophecy states that any child born of a union under its full light, especially one involving the tainted magic, would not be Eldorian. They would be an aberration, a vessel for the blight itself, destined to unleash its full destructive power upon the kingdom, not heal it." Lyra's breath hitched, the ancient scroll slipping from her numb fingers, clattering to the polished stone floor. The revelation struck her like a physical blow, a chilling confirmation of her deepest fears, twisting the knife of her past rejections. Her taint was not just a mark of shame, but a weapon, a potential catalyst for ultimate destruction. The moral dilemma clawed at her. How could she possibly consent to a union that promised such devastation? How could she continue this pretense, knowing that a true heir, a pure Eldorian, was their only hope, yet also knowing the king was bound by a prophecy that branded her as Eldoria's ultimate undoing? The thought of willingly bringing such a curse into the world, even in ignorance, filled her with a profound, soul-shattering despair. Theron finally turned. His jade eyes, usually so commanding, now held a profound vulnerability, shadowed by an agonizing regret that tore at Lyra's heart. "I brought you here, Lyra," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion, "because the prophecy also spoke of your unique connection to the eternal moon as the only way to reverse the blight, not perpetuate it. You are the key, the one who can master this power. But the council, in their desperation for an heir, twisted the ancient texts, demanded I conceal this secondary, darker truth from you, from everyone. They believe a pure Eldorian heir is their salvation, but it is your unique magic and your life that is truly Eldoria's last hope. I never meant for this burden to fall so heavily upon you." The weight of his words, the raw, unexpected confession of his fear and regret, threatened to undo Lyra completely. His near-loving declaration, stripped of regal pretense, revealed the immense burden he had carried alone, the impossible choices he had been forced to make. Yet, the truth, however tenderly delivered, created an unbridgeable chasm between them. Their union, once a desperate pact, now felt like a ticking bomb, each moment a step closer to Eldoria's potential ruin or the ultimate sacrifice of their individual destinies. The demand for an heir, now a cruel mockery, highlighted the tragic impossibility of their bond, pushing them to the precipice of a heartbreaking rupture, leaving Lyra reeling from the devastating implications for both her future and the kingdom's. The very next morning, a royal decree, sealed with Theron's crest, was delivered to every noble house and posted throughout the capital. It announced an urgent public assembly in the Grand Council chamber at sunset, a gathering of all Eldorian nobility and the High Council, to address the escalating blight and the future of the Eldorian lineage. The wording was ominous, laced with a gravity that sent shivers through the court, hinting at a decision of profound consequence. Lyra knew with a chilling certainty that this was it. The secret was out, or at least a version of it was about to be revealed, and her fate, intertwined with Eldoria's, hung exposed before the judgment of a kingdom that had never truly accepted her. The Grand Council chamber was a suffocating arena of judgment, the air thick with unspoken condemnation as Lyra stood beside Theron, facing the assembled nobility and the High Council. Sunset bled through the stained glass windows, casting long, unsettling shadows that danced like spectres of Eldoria's dying past. Lord Valerius, his face a mask of triumphant malice, rose to speak, his voice booming with feigned sorrow as he began to reiterate the council's demand for a pure heir, painting Lyra as the harbinger of Eldoria's ultimate demise. Lyra felt every gaze, every whisper, a physical assault on her spirit, her past rejections echoing in the cavernous hall, threatening to crush the fragile resolve she had built. The weight of their combined fates pressed down, a monumental burden poised on the precipice of public revelation and irreversible decision. Before Valerius could complete his venomous indictment, Theron's voice, a thunderous roar that silenced all dissent, cut through the chamber. He strode forward, seizing Lyra's hand, his jade eyes blazing with an unprecedented fire that defied every tradition. "Enough of this baseless fear and antiquated prejudice," he declared, his gaze sweeping over the stunned court. "Lyra's taint is a lie, a word twisted by ignorance. She is not a curse, but the purest embodiment of Eldoria's ancient magic, the very heart of the eternal moon's power. I stand before you, not just as your king, but as a man who has found his destiny, his true mate, in her. I love Lyra, not as a political convenience, but with a bond that transcends all your laws and traditions." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber, quickly giving way to a furious uproar as Valerius shrieked in outrage. Theron held Lyra's hand tighter, his grip an anchor in the storm. As he continued, the prophecy was deliberately misinterpreted. My council, in their desperation for a pure heir, concealed the truth. Lyra's magic is not meant to produce a child of the blight, but to reverse it. She is the destined one, the only one, whose unique connection to the eternal moon can heal Eldoria. Our union is not a political pact, but a sacred bond, forging the path to our salvation. The blight withers not because of her, but because you refuse to see the truth of her power. As Theron's words echoed, a shimmering wave of golden light emanated from Lyra, a visible manifestation of her awakened power. The blight-ridden tapestry hanging behind the throne, once a sickly brown, began to mend, its threads weaving themselves into vibrant green and gold right before their astonished eyes. Theron turned to Lyra, his gaze filled with adoration and unwavering conviction. He cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones, and then, before the entire stunned court, he leaned in and kissed her deeply, a kiss of profound love and fierce determination that sealed their destiny, a powerful declaration that transcended all doubt and fear. Peace, not born of silence, but of understanding, began to settle over Eldoria. The blight, now openly confronted and understood, slowly began to recede, its tendrils replaced by vibrant new growth, mirroring the blossoming hope in the hearts of the Eldorian people. Lyra, no longer an outcast, embraced her role as queen, her unique magic now a source of wonder and healing, guiding the kingdom into a new era of balance. Her bond with Theron deepened, an unbreakable tapestry woven from shared sacrifice, fierce love, and a destiny that proved they were undeniably meant for each other, two halves of an ancient, powerful whole. This story ends, but there are many more waiting for you. Next week, a lost oracle will face something even more dangerous. Their journey, from the desolate fringes to the heart of a kingdom renewed, became a legend whispered through the revitalized forests, a testament to love's power to defy prejudice and heal ancient wounds. Theron and Lyra, king and queen, stood as beacons of a new Eldoria, their love story etched into the very fabric of their world, a promise that even the darkest taint could hold the brightest light. Dale, if this story captivated you. Subscribe for the next one. Comment what moment impacted you the most. A new dawn unfurled, painted by the hues of an impossible love.